Hello, welcome to the Resilient Life Hacks podcast today, where we talk about how to win at life by building a stronger spirit, soul, and body. I'm your host, Elizabeth Myers, and I am so excited to have our guest on the show today, Dr. Liz Bataille. She is the author of Life Launch, and she has quite an incredible story to share with us today. We talk about resiliency, and this is a woman who has resiliency. She has been through a lot, and she really has some great nuggets of wisdom to share with us. So thank you, Dr. Liz, for being on the show today.
Hey, thank you so much for inviting me. I'm so
Mhm.
glad to be here and share some things with your listeners and be in the early stages of your podcast. I'm really excited to be here in
Mhm.
sort of the top grid of your starting your
Yeah,
journey.
yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. So can you just give our listeners like a little overview of, where you are currently, what you do, where
Mhm.
you can be reached online, things like that?
Sure. So I currently am doing writing. And I really started that about a year and a half ago. I wrote my first book and published it through Amazon. And as you know, our host mentioned, it's called Life Launch, and that is the beginning of the subtitle is Surviving the Storms of Physical and Sexual Abuse. And because there is another Life Launch book out there that is in the healing categories from many years ago that was published.
Mhm.
And so I've been, getting my word out, getting my message out from the book for the last year or so, and I've started speaking on some podcasts in the last 3 months, and I also am in the clinical medical field. I'm in laboratory medicine, and so I also do that part time. I've been consulting and have had a coronavirus lab recently, so that kept me busy.
I bet, yeah.
Yeah, and some other stuff with DNA
Mhm.
and assigning risk for patients that have cancer and other things like
Mhm.
that. So,
Yeah. So what's
so
fascinating about your story is you have so many different ways that you can relate to people and the struggles that they're going through. So I know we don't have time to talk about your whole story today. Maybe we'll have you on again later for part
yeah.
two. But could you
Right.
just for the listener's sake, kind of go through maybe a list-ish of the various experiences you've had, because there's probably people out there who can relate to one or two of these.
Yeah, sure. Sure. Thank you for that invitation.
Hmm.
Yeah, so the book covers the first 25 years of my life, and as you said, yeah, it's very, it's very long and involved. The audiobook is like 5 hours long, and so, but I wanted to kind of hit on some highlights because I organized the book into sort of four major sections,
Hmm.
and after each section, I sort of kind of bring each section to a little close by sharing a prayer that I feel like I've gotten out of that, piece of my
Hmm.
life or that those experiences that I went through, and then a meditation, and then the life lesson, like the big life lesson in that
Hmm.
section. And so I thought I could probably just go through a few of those with you. And
Yeah.
I wanted to mention about, the prayer and meditation component, because I did hear your last guest on your
Hmm.
interview last week. I did hear her mention that. And
Hmm.
it is really important for me in my life. I learned that prayer is me talking to my higher power, whom I
Hmm.
choose to call God, um, and meditation is me listening, and
Hmm.
that's really important because so many times before I learned that, which I didn't really learn that until towards the end of my book at that stage in my life after 25,
Hmm.
um, that's where I'm going to get the answers. Besides
Hmm.
that, it's just me talking all the time, and not really
Yeah.
learning. So I think that's the first like
Right.
resiliency hack.
Yeah.
But
It's about a relationship, right? Not just
it
a one-sided
is.
conversation.
Yeah, and I know I've studied a little bit in uh well, I forget what it's called now, but we fill up, you know, God's cup as well as he fills
Mhm.
up our cup. We need to reflect back the goodness and the spirit and the strength and all of that stuff back to our higher powers, because his or her its cup also runs down as well. So anyway, but yeah, so in my experience, as you heard from the title of the book, so I experienced quite a few basically traumatic you know I guess that I had these traumatic experiences. I grew up in a large family, 6 girls and 1 boy, and my mom and dad. So there were like 9 people in the house for the first 12
Yeah.
years. 2 of
I
my
know what
sisters
that's
are,
like.
yeah, right. I know we did share that together before,
Mhm.
but it was also very dysfunctional. My mom had experienced some sexual abuse, and a lot of this stuff I found out later. All I was experiencing when I was 5, 6, and 7 was my mom and dad fighting all the time. They physically fought all the time. And I did want to mention, my audience, because my book is really about my life and it goes through all of my stages. My audience really starts in the early teens, because that was really when I was 12 years old, that's when I really started getting into the drugs and the alcohol. And but I had started experiencing sexual abuse earlier than that, or what I believe was sexual abuse in certain cases from my own family members. And so how did I get through those things? And I intersperse throughout my book writing journey that I'm sharing with everybody is I intersperse what I call my saving graces. Because any
Yeah.
one of these things that I experienced, and it's one of the reasons why I wrote the book, because I thought about it and I said, I did end up making a list, Liz. I
Mhm.
made a list. It's about 50 items long. It's in my free resources on my website that we'll give everybody at the end of the show. Made a list of all of the traumas that I experienced.
Yeah.
There's over 50 of them, individual
Wow.
traumas like rape, you
Mhm.
know, this, that, the other thing, alcoholism. So, and the title of my book is Physical and Sexual Abuse, because some of the physical abuse isn't just domestic violence acting against me or my parents being overly aggressive with the whatever they call it, punishment,
Mhm.
whatever they call that, spanking. Um, but worse than that, it's also me abusing myself with the alcohol and the drugs. That's type of
Yeah.
physical abuse as well. So it's a shorter title, but it really covers so many things.
Yeah.
But my saving graces, and that's what I kind of want to share with you on this
Yeah.
platform, because that's really my resiliency life hacks. I call them
Mhm.
saving graces, but they fit in with your. So the
Mhm.
first thing is that my mom did, even though she was a big one of the rageaholic people in my life.
Yeah.
She did do some things that were extremely good for me, and that's why I turned out so well, I think. The saving graces. So one of them was she did take me to church. At that time, we were Christian, and I practiced Christianity for the first 33 years of my life. And having a relationship with God was important to me. I did later move away from that religion. I'm still in a monotheistic religion, and I still have a relationship with God, the same relationship that I had when I was Christian as well. But it's just a different, set of external things that I go through that I'm more comfortable with. But may have also been because one of my abuses was perpetrated by the minister,
Mm.
at my particular
Yeah.
place of worship. But that was one of, like I said, there have been many instances of that type of thing. So anyway, yeah, so prayer and meditation, talking to my higher power. I did have a spiritual experience when I was got arrested. No, I didn't get arrested. It was the first broken bone that I had, and I
Mm.
was about 15, and I was actually buying drugs from a person across the street from my school and running them across the street, literally running them with me and them in my pocket to sell them to some of my friends that were waiting for me. And I got hit by a car, and I had this spiritual experience at that moment where a voice actually spoke to me out loud. It sounded like it was out loud, like everybody could hear it, but I learned pretty quickly that it was in my head. And it was my God talking to me and telling me that what I was doing was wrong. And that's basically why he knocked me down. I did break a
Your attention.
bone. Yeah, he did get my attention. And I call my higher power him, just because, that's what I've always done, in my lifetime. So I hope that doesn't distract anybody that's listening to this. Um, but sometimes I try to say it or he or she or whatever. But yeah, it was a male's voice, and it was, it was like a father telling me that I did wrong and don't ever do that again. And I didn't ever do that again. I never ever sold drugs after that. I did buy them. I had that journey still to go through for 10 more years. But anyway, so that was like the beginning part of it. And so prayer, meditation, a relationship with a higher power. And then I had music. Music was a big savings grace for me. My mother started me on the piano. I participated in chorus. I've been a singer, and I started college in music, and then I went on to, more biology and got my doctorate in that field. But I was originally going to go into music for music therapy. So, this new sort of life of mine with sharing my message of hope and healing. And, my message is very similar to yours in that it's a three-part, for mind, body, and spirit. And my spirit, I explain in my course, is spirit/soul, so it's all of that other ethereal part. And so, music was a big part of sort of the mental, emotional, and sometimes physical healing as well, because I incorporated dance with music and the physical movement of dance. And I was able to escape through music big time. And of course, I escaped through drugs as well, but I was able to escape through music once I put those down, and not be using something else. And then education, school, it was also an escape for me to get away from the trauma of my home life. And I also was getting positive attention at school. So I excelled in school. And that's another reason why I went on for my doctorate, because it was always something that brought joy to me, because I could do well at it and I could get attention that way. And it was positive attention rather than, getting hit for doing bad things at the house.
Yeah.
But yes, and I wanted to bring up another big thing that happened to me that was instrumental. I mentioned the age of 12. What happened to me a month before I turned 12 was my brother, who I mentioned in the beginning was my only male sibling. I had 5 sisters. He was killed in a car accident. It wasn't instantaneous. He was in a semi-comatose state for 30 days. They were hit by a drunk driver. He was sitting behind the driver in the back seat, and that's exactly where they hit him. And he went out the window sideways like that, head first. That I was 3 weeks from turning 13, and I was 2 weeks from getting my period, which I didn't know at the time. I was devastated, and I prayed during that 30 days that he was in the hospital. I had a real shake in my faith during that time period, because I was going to Sunday school regularly, and I knew that God would answer my prayers. And so it was, whenever more than one or more of you gather in my name, your prayers will be answered. That was the promise that I read about in the Bible. And I believed that. And so I would pray with all of my friends and my family, and I knew that he was going to make it through, and he didn't, and he died. And I was mad at God for a long time about that. And then my Sunday school teacher told me one day, it says that your prayer will be answered. It doesn't mean that you're going to get the answer that you want.
Yeah, I can relate to that a lot. That was, in my grief, same thing. I cried out to God, and I felt abandoned. But part of my growth through that process is to realize that my relationship with God is not meant to be this transactional relationship where if I do X, Y, and Z and I don't do A, B, C, then life will be all roses and sunshine,
Right.
but just that deeper faith and that deeper relationship with God. It's interesting
Mhm.
to me too, how, you grew up with this trauma in your life. And so just naturally you develop these different coping mechanisms and different ways to deal with that. Obviously, as you described, some were healthy and some were not.
Right.
Um, but even that's just a way to process or escape from all these things that were going on. But before we go further, I just want to say I am so sorry for all the things that you have endured. I know that doesn't help heal at all, but I just want to express my compassion to you and my respect for you for all that you have survived.
Thank you so much. It means a lot to me.
Hmm.
Yeah, it does. And again, back to, the reason why I'm on your podcast and why I've been trying to get my message out there is just so that it can reach somebody else. Because from the age of 15 to 25, I wanted to kill myself, and that's part of my story is suicidal ideation. And I had people around me that had taken their lives. And I found out many years later that it actually was in my family line as well. My great grandmother ended her life in the late 20s, early 30s. They believe that was postpartum depression. I have a first cousin who is 2 years older than me. She ended her life in when I was 21. She was 23. I had to come back from my honeymoon, my first marriage, a little bit early because she took her life, and we came back for the funeral. And then in my second book, which you have already heard a little bit about on one of my previous podcasts, I my third marriage, my husband, who was the father of my only child, and he ended his life, and our son was only 2 years old. And so, how did I get through all of these things? Well, the last thing that I kind of want to say about this part of my story, as I know that we're, already getting past the halfway point with your time, is that at the age of 25, and I mentioned I started wanting to end my life or have the suicidal ideation at 15. I share about it all in my book again, so that I've actually already helped some of my friends, some people that I've given the book to and directed them to the book, and they've gotten it. They've called me up and said, "Hey, I'm thinking about ending my life right now, and I thought you might be able to help me
Oh,
because I
wow.
read about it in your book." And
Yeah.
so that's what I'm here for. I'm here and I'm sharing my message with anybody that I can, because and I love your platform because it is about resiliency. It's about recognizing that this too shall pass,
Hmm.
and we are promised that. But the thing is, we got to hang in there, and you got to grab onto whatever it is that that you can grab onto to get you over that hump. And for me, it was all these things. It was God,
Hmm.
it was religion and spirituality and music and education and teachers and the people that were the what I call my heroes in my book, and I
Hmm.
and I list some of them. Um, but at the age of 25, after 10 years and using the drugs and the alcohol, what happened for me, this critical point and this turning point in my life where my book ends, book one ends, is that I came into the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. And Alcoholics Anonymous, I'm not sure if you realize it or not, but it is actually based upon a Christian group.
Hmm.
I right now, because I'm nervous, I'm not remembering. I think
Yeah.
I remembered it. It's called the Oxford Group,
Okay.
and they do say that it is not, a religious-based organization in our preambles and stuff, and it's a spiritual program. It's not a religious program, and that's why we try to talk about a higher power and try not to give it a male or a female pronoun, because we want to reach everybody. We don't want to leave people out that are trying to save their life from drugs and alcohol.
Hmm.
So I came into AA first, and then within 30 days I came into NA as well, because I was using marijuana mostly at that age. I was 25 by then, and I had at least moved off of everything else, thank God, and was not using anything else but marijuana then at that point. But I still had that history, and I still had that personality.
Mhm.
And so God and a higher power is at the center of healing from addiction of any sort. And so that went along with the healing. For me, I was able to get into healing a lot of those other aspects of my life through related programs that are all kind of grouped in the bucket of 12-step programs. And the last thing that I want to share is before, sort of ending my story is that when I was asked through this class that you and I have been part of, is what's the one thing, that you feel like is your primary message? And my one thing for me is hope. Because, when I always felt like I was a hopeful person, I always felt like I was a positive person, even though all these things happened to me. And I was diagnosed with some level of depression in my early 20s, like a little black cloud was following me around, but a lot of people thought I was one of these upbeat and positive people. And I felt like I was, but when my husband ended his life, I mean, that was really, my world ended for me at that point, and I did lose hope. And I was 12 years clean when I think I was more than that. When he ended his life, I was 10. Actually, I was more like 17 years clean because we'd been married for about 5 years. I think I had 12 years when we met. He had about 5 years clean, and I had 17 years clean and sober. And I had a little baby. He was 2 years and 10 months old. We had this beautiful little bundle of joy, and I I had no problem with hope. And then when my husband did what he did, I lost all hope. And
Mhm.
it took me 10 years, Elizabeth,
Yeah.
to get back onto the other side of that, which brought me up to about 2 years before I decided to start writing the book.
Mhm.
I didn't want to live my life. I didn't enjoy my life anymore, and I didn't want to live my life. I didn't want to
Yeah.
end it. I wasn't suicidal because I knew I had to live for my son, and I knew I had to
Mhm.
take care of him, and thank God I wasn't
Mhm.
contemplating those things, but I wasn't living it,
Right.
the way that
Yeah.
I had been before. I wasn't out loud living my life, and I definitely didn't enjoy my life.
Yeah.
And I just did all these things in the healing resources that I have for your audience that are free on my website. I have a list of about 35 or 40 healing resources that I did, not what I
Mhm.
heard about somebody else did work for them. These are all things that I did, whether it involves the mind, the body, or the spirit. These are things that I did that worked for me. And I can't say any one thing except for all of those things at some point ended up with getting my hope back. And I tried one last thing, another thing that I had never tried before. It was something on the list. I don't want to just mention it because it's not like that was the all powerful thing, but I
Mhm.
did something. January of 2016. My husband died in 2005, October. So it was over 10 years, and I did this thing, and it was again another therapy that I'd never tried before. And finally, the dark cloud was lifted, and thank God. And I do say thank God because for me,
Yeah.
it was my higher power that finally brought hope back into my life. And I
Mhm.
really feel like if there's one thing that I want to share with people, it's hope, because I really do think that if you have to pick one thing, that is the difference between life and death for
Yeah.
me.
That is critical. You're right. And I've
Yeah.
been in that place too where I lost my hope. Interestingly, I'm working on my second book and
Yeah.
I'm working on the chapter about hope.
Oh my
So
gosh,
I was
perfect.
just talking about, that depression is the diminishing of hope. And when we get to the point of having, suicidal thoughts, that's like really just saying there is no hope. There's no point in
Right.
living longer, and holding on to that hope and grabbing onto that as our anchor is so important. When we were in survival training, I went to the military academy, but they told us part of the training was, and I don't remember exactly, but it was like you could go 3 weeks without food and 3 days without water, 3 minutes without air, and 3 seconds without hope. And they said that like prisoners of war, people who were together in prison, they could tell exactly who would pass away next, because as soon as they gave up hope, they went away. And
Mhm.
so it is, I mean, even without doing anything to themselves, it's just you give up hope, and you feel like there's not a reason to live. But I love you have so many things to share with so many different people, whether
Right.
they're dealing with domestic abuse or substance abuse for them, or a loved one, all these different things, where you can speak to that. And also I can imagine, like, there's a lot of things I could relate to, and some of that, I haven't experienced those things. So I'm like, wow, if she can overcome all those things, then my one or two little things, that does increase hope.
Yeah.
Just that you're still here and life is still worth living. And
Mhm.
I do think that's so critical. You say higher power, I say God, but we can't do it alone, and
Right.
there is no hope just in ourselves. So
That's right.
I think we need that power to
Mhm.
overcome these things in our lives.
Amen. I do agree with that for sure. I would
Mhm.
not have been able to do any of this stuff alone, and for me, my higher power works through people as well. People like you, some of these other podcasts that I've listened to, and through the years, the friends and the mentors and the fellows in for me, the fellows in AA and NA, that are all struggling with basically a similar thing in this disease of addiction. And
Mhm.
I'll hear the message that I need to hear from them. And so for me, you were talking about timelines and
Mhm.
3 minutes, 3 days, whatever.
Yeah.
I went 10 plus years without hope.
Yeah.
And it was horrible. It
Yeah.
was horrible. And I was still maintained as best as I could a career, and
Mhm.
for me, sometimes my brain and my intellect and the education, like I said, it was an escape for me. That has continued to be a mental shelter for me. Is if I'm in my brain, I'm not in my emotions.
Mm.
And so I used to jokingly say, the number of degrees that I have, because I'm three credits short of an associate's, and I have a bachelor's, and I have
Yeah.
a master's, and I have a doctorate. So I used to tell people, they'd be like, God, like you did a lot of school. And I'd say, well, the number of degrees that
Yeah.
I have is a reflection of my ability to be able to avoid myself.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
to a degree, again, I've been able to just put on hold. I had 2 divorces before I married my third husband, who ended his life. I was in the middle of a master's and in the middle of a divorce. And, I would just say, oh, I can't emote right now. I have to take
Yeah.
an exam, or I have to
Yeah.
study for an exam. And I would just do that. So, we have different survival skills, and some of them are not healthy. Some of
Mhm.
them are. For me, I just think that I don't think there's any way that education can be an unhealthy survival skill.
Yeah.
But, some people do the TV, or, which may not be a great one, if you do it to excess. Some people do the lifting weights. As long as you
Mhm.
don't injure yourself, that may be a positive one. Like I said,
I
listening to
did running.
music. Yeah, running, again, any of these things we can take to another level and maybe hurt ourselves in doing it too much. But there are good survival skills, more or less, and sort of more positive and more negative survival skills. And
Mhm.
so I would encourage people to try to get into the ones that are going to help you rather
Mhm.
than hurt you, because if you use the ones that are going to hurt you, then you're going to have another problem when you
That's
get
right.
over the
Yeah.
problem that you were avoiding. So you might
That's
as
a
well,
very good point.
right? Yeah.
Yeah. Might as well deal with it head on.
There's another resiliency hack for your listeners.
There you
you
go.
know?
Reduce the obstacles you have to overcome in the future by making a good
Right.
choice today.
Right. While
Yeah.
you're trying to reduce your obstacles so it
Right.
doesn't
Right.
become a, negative spiral.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So,
So just, as we kind of wrap up here, but like what would be like your final message to listeners today who are maybe struggling with a burden that's gotten too heavy? Maybe it's been a secret, maybe it's still fresh and raw. What's that thing you can give to that person in the moment experiencing pain, that would encourage them to continue on in hope?
Yeah. So the first thing is sharing the burden. A burden
Yes.
shared is a burden cut in half. And I
Hmm.
do believe that I am here today, if not for anything else, it's been because I've shared whatever it was at the time with either somebody else or with my higher power, or both. I feel like prayer is extremely important, and then meditation and listening for the answer. If you're not comfortable with going to another human being about it, but then in recovery, that's our primary thing is sharing the burdens that we have that are making us want to use, with God, myself first, getting
Hmm.
honest with myself
Yeah.
first.
Sometimes that's the hardest
Then,
part.
yes, then with my higher power. So they
Hmm.
actually put the higher power second. And then they do ask us to share it with one other human being. And that person is usually called our sponsor. And I can tell you that I have avoided relapsing, even if I didn't reach out to another human being, just through prayer and meditation, and then doing what I needed to do to commune with my higher power, and just drive by the bar, just
Hmm.
drive by whatever on my way to, let me talk to God about this first. And then I talk to
Hmm.
God, and then the urge goes away. So, I have been able to save my life either through that, or certainly other people have helped me save my life as well by reaching back once I reached out
Hmm.
to them by
Yeah.
telephone or whatever. So in this time of coronavirus, when we're all socially distancing, I'm encouraging people to get connected virtually.
Yes.
Don't stay at home and isolate and just watch TV and wallow there. Get connected through, live video chats on whatever platform. Google has their own thing now. There's a lot of free stuff out there. Zoom is free for just one or two people, and Facebook Lives, all this stuff. Stay
Hmm.
connected. And if you feel like it's becoming negative, like sometimes they say about Facebook and people wanting to I don't go onto things, social media, for likes. I go there to learn. I go there to read. I go there to connect with people, and as long as you don't, take it personally or let people bully you. I just stay
Yeah.
away from the spirit suckers. I call them
Know
spirit
what to ignore.
suckers.
Yeah.
Yes,
Know
yes.
when to keep scrolling and don't get stuck.
Yes, but don't doom scroll. Don't doom scroll.
Yeah.
And so I would also seek out. Also, the other thing I want to add, I know you said one thing kind of, but just as you and I were doing, laughter, try to find ways. When my husband first ended his life, the only thing that I could read were the Psalms in the Bible. I couldn't even read. I was a big reader of books every night. I couldn't read anything except for Psalms. So
Mhm.
thank God for that. And on TV, I couldn't do anything at all unless it was something that was somewhat going to make me laugh. And I was very fortunate that Stephen Colbert had just come out with his Colbert Report. It was 2005, and I was able to start watching that, and it was the only thing that made me start to smile again,
Yeah.
after a couple of months.
Mhm.
And so, I did this sort of navigation through these things more or less by myself. My sisters and my mom, again, I had 5 sisters and my mom, that's 6 women, because my had already passed. 6 days a week out of the 7, one sister or my mom called me once per day. And then each week they each drew straws or volunteered for who was going to call me twice. And they called me every night, 7 nights a week, for about the first 2 months after my husband passed away.
Mm.
And that really helped me out a lot, the
That's
talk
awesome.
therapy. And I didn't have to
Mhm.
pay anybody for it.
Yeah.
So that would be
Mhm.
what I would say again, is making the
Yeah.
connection, and try to, if you can, just try to find some humor or something that makes you laugh,
Mhm.
because that is very healing and that gives us hope.
Yeah. I agree with you. I think we were created for community. And just like you said, we're supposed to share our burdens. And that's
Mhm.
especially painful in this time where so many people are divided over so many things. And
Yeah.
really, at the core, we're all just hurting in very similar ways. But that was a problem I struggled with too, because I felt bad about being depressed. And so I hid it, and I tried to fake it and tried to pretend like everything was okay. But, what I share with people is when you take that ugly thing that you don't like or you don't want to face and you drag it out into the light, it shrinks.
Yes.
It's now I talk about, when I had depression, anxiety all the time, because that's part of my ministry. And it every time I do, it's just still, lifting off more of the burden. It's taking this negative aspect of my life and turning that around to help other people. And there's healing in that, even ongoing healing for me too. And so I think that's very wise of you. Thanks for sharing that. If our listeners want to get in touch with you, give us your website and what resources you have for them.
Yeah, so I'm on my website is www.drlizlifelaunch.com, and I think you're going to put that on the notes, right, of the
Yes.
show. And I'm also on Facebook, and it's Dr. Liz Bataille. I'm on LinkedIn. It's also Dr. Liz Bataille, or Lizette, Lizeette. Not sure. But yes, and you can find all those links on my website as well. And you can get your free healing resources on my website. It's listed as that. Just click on the link. It will put your email onto my email list, and then you will get notifications when I'm going to publish my second book as well.
Okay.
You can also find my book on Amazon, and that's also through my website as well. You can find the book there, or you can just Google Dr. Liz Life Launch on Amazon, and it'll come up. It's an ebook, a print book, a softback, and an audio book that's on over 40 different audiobook platforms as well, if you don't want to read it.
Yeah.
So yeah, those are all available.
Okay. And I will put all those links in the show notes so that people can access that. Thank you for providing that free gift to our listeners. That's awesome. And I know that even just hearing your story, so many people can be uplifted and encouraged of all that you've survived and now thrived through. It's just such an encouragement to them that they can overcome what they're going through, and that there is still always a reason to hope.
Amen.
And so thank you for sharing that with us.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Yes.
I appreciate the opportunity.
So thank you to all of our listeners and everyone who is tuned in with us today. If you haven't done so already, please head over to iTunes and give us a like and a review. That really helps us spread this message of hope and healing that we want to share with others, and gets this information out to other people. And I also wanted to just remind you, this is the last week to sign up for the Women's Self-Care Conference. It's actually ongoing this week. So I think Friday or Saturday is the last day that you can actually get in on it. You can go to tinyurl/selfcare with Liz. So that's TINY.URL/self-care with Liz. And you have 2 Liz's on the show today. So it's doubly relevant. So
yes.
Thank you very much. And we will see you all next week.
Bye-bye.